The Kbur UFO Incident. Kbur is a tiny community that's situated south of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. During the evening hours of December 9, 1965, the residents of Kbur noticed a bizarre fireball in the sky. The object was spotted at around 5:15 p.m., and residents claimed that it looked like a giant acorn. The fireball then crashed into the woods, but before the community could figure out what happened, the area was surrounded by the police and members of the military. And Kbur wasn't the only place to see something strange in the sky that evening. People from California to New York claimed to have seen a strange fireball in the sky. Reports from Michigan and Ontario, Canada claimed that they too saw the object. They said that they saw debris falling from it and it soared over the communities. And in some cases, the debris had started several fires. It was originally reported in the press that a meteorite had hit the Kbur area. The director of a Pennsylvania observatory supported the claim. The director explained that a Geminid meteor shower was expected during the late hours of December 9th, and an astronomer from the University of Michigan echoed the statement in another newspaper article. Meanwhile, Kbur residents claimed to have heard some sort of shock wave on the day in question. The director of the observatory mentioned that the same thing had happened in the area in 1938 during another meteor shower. Residents of Kbur were skeptical of the meteorite claim. Some citizens told local newspapers that a strange blue light had descended on the area where the crash occurred, and then it simply vanished. There are some in Kbur that believe it was a UFO that crashed and not a meteorite. Those who saw the acorn-shaped object said it was 12 feet in length and was roughly 7 feet in diameter. One man who claimed to have seen the object reported that it had what appeared to be something resembling Egyptian hieroglyphics inscribed onto it. But the man said that he couldn't get a great view because he was quickly removed from the crash site by law enforcement. The incident led to UFO enthusiasts descending upon the community to find out what happened. Then, nearly 30 years after the strange object crashed in Kbur, the story was featured on the television series Unsolved Mysteries. The Unsolved Mysteries episode, and some later newspaper articles, gave the Kbur side of the story that wasn't told in 1965. People from the town claimed that when the military was in the area, they removed a car from a resident for some strange reason. The townsfolk were also informed that the acorn-shaped object was transported to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. That's the same base where the Roswell, New Mexico crash debris was reportedly taken for observation. Also, Wright-Patterson at one time may or may not have had the remains of aliens stored in a base laboratory. Those who've studied the Kbur incident believe it's the second Roswell event in UFO history. It was 1995 when the U.S. government stated that the military was by no means involved with the 1965 investigation at Kbur. Citizens disputed that claim, though, because they saw military personnel and vehicles in their community following the crash. Another theory that emerged after the incident was that the acorn-shaped object was a Soviet spacecraft known as Cosmos 96. It was designed to explore the planet Venus, but Cosmos 96 failed and came crashing back to Earth on December 9, 1965. It's believed that it crashed in Kbur and that the military wanted the spacecraft so they could review the technology the Soviets were using for their space program. If the US had done this, they would have violated an international law they signed in 1962 with the Soviets. The agreement stated that if something from one country would crash in another, then the debris belonged to the country where it originated. The Cosmos 96 theory has been disputed because it was reported that the spacecraft crashed in Canada. However, the wreckage was apparently never recovered. Russians were asked about the 1965 crash during the 1990s, and they were of the opinion that it was some inferior piece of American-made equipment they were too embarrassed to disclose to the public. A documentary about the event was released in 1995 and was titled Kbur: The Untold Story. In 2009, it was reported that an investigative journalist used the Freedom of Information Act (FOIA) process to gather information from the U.S. government about the incident. The reporter received documentation and, after their review, it was determined that there was no smoking gun regarding a UFO crash. However, the documents, according to the journalist, contradicted themselves. Also, some key documents were reportedly destroyed or signed out and were never returned. But after reviewing the documents, the journalist wasn't sold on a UFO crash or a Soviet spacecraft cover-up. What truly happened is still a mystery, and in commemoration of the event, the people of Kecksburg have a UFO festival every year. They even have a UFO store in town. Do you have a favorite unexplained mystery? Would you like to see more videos on subjects like this one? Like and subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification for updates regarding new videos. The disappearance of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 left Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia for Beijing, China on March 8, 2014. There were 239 passengers and crew on board the flight, but the plane never made it to its destination. Instead, it disappeared off the face of the Earth. So what really happened to Flight 370? Flight 370 left Kuala Lumpur at 12:41 a.m. It was a Boeing 777, and the captain was Zahari Ahmad Shah, who was accompanied by his first officer, Farik Abdul Hamid, in the cockpit. The plane took off and went on its scheduled flight path toward Beijing. And as Flight 370 crossed the South China Sea at around 1:19 a.m., they made a routine call to air traffic control in Malaysia. Flight 370 was then instructed to get in contact with air traffic control in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, because they were about to enter their airspace. But a few minutes later, Flight 370 disappeared from radar completely. The flight not showing up on radar indicates a possible malfunction of the transponders on the plane. Another possibility is that they were shut off directly by someone on the flight. Although air traffic control wasn't able to get a visual on the plane due to the transponder, it was picked up by the Malaysian military's radar system, and what they discovered was baffling. Flight 370 was to take a northeasterly path to Beijing, but when Flight 370 crossed into the South China Sea, it took an unexpected left and flew back across the mainland of Malaysia. It flew by Penang, an island off the west coast of Malaysia, and made another odd turn toward the northwest of the Andaman Sea. The flight continued that path, but from there, it totally vanished, never making it to Beijing. So how could this flight be lost to air traffic control? Planes at the time weren't using up-to-date technology. Many planes were tracked with radar instead of GPS. GPS wasn't the perfect solution, but it would have given investigators and air traffic controllers a better final location of the aircraft. A search for the plane was underway, and the focus was the South China Sea. Numerous countries aided in the search, and days after the disappearance, the Malaysian military shared what they knew about the strange flight pattern. This meant that the Andaman Sea should also be searched for wreckage. Those involved in the search went as far as the Bay of Bengal near India and Bangladesh, but nothing was found in the water as far as the wreckage was concerned. Then, a major curveball was thrown at the families and rescue workers. Flight 370 had satellite communication records, and those were looked over for clues. Satellite communications for Flight 370 were linked to a station in Perth, Australia. This data uncovered some shocking evidence. The satellite communication link was disrupted for a few minutes after it made the odd left turn, but was restored for nearly 6 hours. Flight 370 had enough fuel for a 6-hour flight, but not even a drop more. The satellite information was very important. It gave researchers an area to determine the final destination of Flight 370. 2 arcs were determined to be the best possible locations. One arc went southwest from Malaysia into the Indian Ocean, while the other arc went northwest from China into Central Asia. The southwest path was examined over the Indian Ocean. If the plane crashed on land using the northwest arc, then someone would have reported something. The waters of the Indian Ocean were combed, and there was nothing found. The families were extremely upset, as there seemed to be nothing in the way of debris. However, a clue was discovered in July 2015 on the island of Réunion, which is situated east of Madagascar. This was 2,300 miles west of the southwest path in the Indian Ocean. More debris was found on Madagascar and the southeastern coast of Africa. There were a total of 27 pieces believed to be from Flight 370. And after examining the pieces, 17 of them were confirmed to have originated from the missing plane. A final report was provided in July 2018 by the Malaysian government. They believed that the plane changed course due to someone at the controls and nothing mechanical. However, they had no explanation of what happened to the flight. Theories about the disappearance vary, but some fingers have been pointed at Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah. And the most damning evidence was found on a flight simulator that Shah had in his home. It was reported that Shah's computer was investigated, and he apparently flew a simulated course similar to Flight 370. This was reportedly done 1 month before the aircraft disappeared. This evidence has raised the question if Shah committed some sort of mass suicide by taking down the plane in a remote location in the Indian Ocean. Some dispute this claim, though, saying that Shah was living a good life and had a wonderful family. Another theory is that the plane lost cabin pressure and that the oxygen masks didn't properly deploy. If that happened, people would have passed out on the plane, including the captain and co-pilot. Some believe that this happened while the plane was on autopilot, but again, this is just a theory. The mystery of Flight 370 is almost 10 years old, and it remains unsolved. It's perhaps the biggest aviation mystery since the disappearance of the plane piloted by Amelia Earhart. The Max Headroom Hijack. 2 Chicago news stations had their signals hijacked on November 22, 1987. A man wearing a mask of iconic 1980s pop culture sensation Max Headroom gave viewers something they'll never forget. News stations WGN and WTTW were the victims of this stunt, and the culprit remains unknown to this very day. If you're not familiar with Max Headroom, he was a comedy character that was computer-generated. He was popular with young people and was even a spokesperson for Coca-Cola. So what exactly happened? WGN was airing their 9 o'clock news on November 22nd. Dan Rowan, their sportscaster, was providing the highlights of the game between the Chicago Bears and the Detroit Lions from earlier in the day. Bears players were being interviewed and key plays from the game were shown. Then, everything went black. A man wearing a Max Headroom mask appeared on the screen. There was nothing in the way of clear audio. It was more like garbled electronic noise. A figure on the screen was moving back and forth in a motion that resembled laughing. It was absolutely bizarre, and the incident lasted less than 30 seconds. But things weren't exactly over. The screen went black again, and then Dan Rowan suddenly appeared. He was laughing and told viewers that he had no idea what happened. Rowan would then blame a computer at WGN for going wild and causing a disruption. Things went back to normal at WGN after that, but that wasn't the only signal hijacking that occurred that evening. WTTW was the local Chicago PBS station, and at 11 o'clock p.m. that same day, they were airing an old episode of Doctor Who. This time, the hijacker cut right into the episode. Another difference was that the audio was somewhat clear. Max Headroom was back, but the hijack would be longer than what happened at WGN. Max would say things, but his audio was distorted and hard to hear. The name Chuck Swirsky was mentioned, and he was a sportscaster on WGN. He also performed some NSFW antics, including exposing his backside on camera. And on another occasion, he held a can of Pepsi to mock Headroom's Coca-Cola sponsorship. Staff at WTTW were shocked and frustrated. Their station was hijacked and they couldn't figure out a way to get Max Headroom off their air. An engineer wasn't in the building, so those working the late shift were frantically pressing any button possible to rid themselves of the Headroom craziness. It was 90 seconds of Max Headroom madness that crossed the boundaries of decency standards before Doctor Who returned to the air. Chicago had a real mystery on their hands. And the question on everybody's lips was, who hijacked the stations and why? The story made national headlines immediately. The Federal Communications Commission wasn't pleased, and they decided to launch a full investigation. What happened at WGN and WTTW was illegal and was considered piracy. Whoever performed this stunt had to understand the basics of hijacking a television station. They had to be set up somewhere in downtown Chicago near the transmitters for the two stations to pull it off successfully. The person behind it could have been fined $10,000 and likely would have been sent to prison for a year. But the hijacker was never caught or identified. 1 year before the Max Headroom incident, HBO was hijacked by someone named Captain Midnight. This hijacking was a message that appeared on the screen complaining about how people with private satellite dishes had their HBO signal scrambled. An investigation was launched, and the culprit was found to be John McDougal from Ocala, Florida. McDougal was put on probation for a year and had to pay a fine of $5,000. By then, people were still trying to put a name to the WGN and WTTW hijackings. A few names were mentioned around town, but there was no evidence to lead to an arrest. The Max Headroom hijacking lives on in Chicago folklore to this very day. What similar topics would you like for us to cover in upcoming episodes? Let us know down below in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye!